Welcome, you guys. I'm so glad to be here. My name is María, Añez, marketing expert and content creator here at ArtPlacer, and I'm actually here to host a really important thing. This is the Women's Talk Reshaping the Art World series. It's an interview series we're going to be having all through March, commemorating Women's Month. We're going to be interviewing artists, gallerists, artpreneurs from all paths of life and different stages in their career, and they are going to share with us their views on, well, how they have paved their own way in the art world. And right now, I'm going to invite Stephanie Coria. She's one of the gallery. She's right here. Hi, Stephanie. I just sent you an invite. Hi.
Hi.
I'm so glad to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's great. Well, there's a lot of friends who join us today to hear about this conversation. And well, as we previously talked when we were preparing this, before we prepared these interviews, we had the chance to ask to the ArtPlacer community, to our fellow women artists, gallerists, and curators, their opinions and different takes, like what challenge have they faced on the art community, what opportunities have they found, how they have made their own community. And I wanted to start this interview with a quote from an artist called Jamie Nixon. She said, and I'm quoting, "As a woman engaging with gallerists, the dynamic suggests a subtle yet pervasive skepticism towards women artists, demanding we prove our dedication and talent beyond what is typically expected from our male counterparts." And why am I bringing this up? Because Stephanie right here is with us. She's she's an artist, but she's also a gallerist herself. So I want to use this quote to kind of kick off this interview. But first, Stephanie, can you tell us a bit about yourself and what is your background as both an artist and a gallerist?
Absolutely. So, of course, my name is Stephanie Coria. My start in the art world started, like most people, when I was in high school and was taking art classes. And I was just so in love with ceramics that I really wanted to pursue it as a career. Although I did have that stigma of what can you do with an art degree? So when I was going into college, I decided to pursue studies in art history and archaeology, kind of put the actual art making on the back burner for a while. And that led me to working in both art archives and working for museums like the Kimball Art Museum in Fort Worth, Texas. So I got to learn more about collections and the history of art. And once I was starting to find my way into the gallery scene, I started working for wonderful artists in the Dallas Design District like Ginger Fox and Deborah Ferrari. And, the rest is kind of history.
Okay, and what actually led you to take that step into actually leading your own gallery space? Because that is what you're doing right now, right?
Yeah, so just this last year, my fiance and I opened the Coria Jacobs Gallery in downtown Franklin, Pennsylvania. And we just stumbled upon an opportunity and decided to take the leap. It was something that neither of us had really anticipated doing so quickly in our careers, but ultimately, he was the biggest inspiration for me, my fiance, Reed Jacobs, because he's a professional glassblower. And we just both had this love for artwork and being able to share not only our work, but the work of others and the work of our friends, that we decided to reach out to other artists that we knew. And they just jumped at the opportunity to not only support us, but to have their work shown in an area that doesn't really have the opportunity to see a lot of contemporary art.
That's really amazing, because one of the things that we have previously talked, and if you guys want to learn more about it and what Stephanie has done with the Coria Jacobs Gallery, I invite you to visit the ArtPlacer blog, where we had the chance to previously talk on an interview about how they managed to create this local space that has actually opened up frontiers for their artists and taken them from local to global. Um, I wanted to know, Stephanie, if there is, or how do you manage to balance the creative processes or the creative process of or your artist side with the business side of now leading your own gallery space?
That part I'm still working on a little bit. It definitely took a back burner as we were getting the gallery started, and having moved to Pennsylvania from Dallas, Texas, a lot of my studio equipment is still in boxes. But we are in the process of rebuilding our studio. So hopefully in the near future, I can get back to making art the way that I used to and get a new collection going. But there is definitely, like, you just have to set aside time, even if you can't get any physical work made. Just being able to sketch or write down your ideas in your spare time really goes a long way.
That's really nice because at the end of the day, it's like you never. It's like this phrase, like you never stop being an artist. You just have different eras in your own process. So right now, maybe the one that you're going through is more focused on the gallerist perspective, but still the creatives are there. I wanted to know,
Absolutely.
Stephanie, as both an artist and a gallerist, and as a woman, have you faced any specific challenge, or do you think that you have encountered biases that have to do with gender all through your career?
I have. And, that's something that is unfortunate, but most women are trying to figure out how to overcome that. And one of the things that I've noticed the most is usually when you're talking to male collectors, they occasionally will try to, talk over you. So it is always important to, kind of stand your ground and show that you know what you're talking about, and to kind of believe in yourself. And that's one of the hardest parts is you always have to, kind of prove that you know what you're doing. Whereas I think some men have it a little bit easier. That's more natural for them. They don't have that double standard.
Yeah, it's like what artist Jamie Nick's friend shared with us that I previously quoted at the beginning of the interview. One of our ArtPlacer's community members, she's an artist, and she mentioned, I want to repeat her quote, as a woman engaging in galleries, the dynamic suggests a subtle, pervasive skepticism towards women artists, demanding that we prove our dedication and talent beyond what is typically expected from our male counterparts. And I think there is a lot of truth in that. And when you mentioned that it's so really important to stand your ground, um, and make your voice been heard because you know what you're doing. You know you're completely in charge of what you're doing in that aspect. So I wanted to know if you had ever had a role model of someone inside or in the journey of your career that you looked upon like, okay, I'm encountering these situations or these biases, but I have seen this person going through it, and I kind of see myself in them, and I take them as an example of what I can do to overcome them.
There are so many women who have helped, like, be role models in my life that it's so hard to try and narrow down which ones had the most impact on me. When I started in the gallery scene, I worked for galleries that were women owned. So working for Ginger Fox and Laura Humphrey in Dallas, Texas, as well as Deborah Ferrari, I really looked towards them as role models to see how they handle different situations and how they really hold their voice against anybody who might try to shut them down. And it just shows a lot of power towards the female audience that you don't have to be a man in order to be an artist or to be a gallery owner. You can really stand up for yourself. And even in my educational career, there were other women like Cheryl Mitchell at the University of Texas at Arlington, who I learned collection management from. And she was just an absolute power, and she could stand up to anybody just to say that she needed to take care of collection pieces, and it was her way or the highway. And there's so many other women that I could tag, and I'll probably give a little shout out to them later on. But it's just really awe-inspiring to see other women, just really stand out in their, careers and just be so confident in what they're doing.
I love that you mentioned that because I think one of our greatest assets is like these bonds that we build, no matter in which field are we working, but there's always a feeling of support between women and a feeling of, hey, we're gonna root for you. Whatever your path is, we're going to be rooting for you because we want you to make you want we want you to make it happen, and there is room for everyone. So I was wondering, in which ways do you think you had to carve or pave your own way and your own path as a woman in the arts?
I think one memory that stands out the most was when I was working for like an archives library. I had a male professor who was so adamant about what he needed done that I had to speak up my voice and say, like there are certain ways that information needs to be shared without bias. And it took a lot for me to stand up to somebody who was not only, had more seniority than me, but, was just more knowledgeable in certain areas, but I knew what I was doing. And being able to, have that confidence was just so important. And I think as you're paving your way, like you just really need to just tell yourself that you are doing good. And, as you're kind of making new waves, being able to share what you do is also really important because not everybody understands what it means to be a gallerist or to be an artist. Everybody has their own image in mind of what that means. And so when you start telling people what it is that you do or what it is that you are good at, that in itself is already like really important.
It is like I think one of like we are always either our biggest critic or our biggest cheerleader, and as you mentioned before, there is great importance in how we identify ourselves and how we identify what is it that we're doing and what we want to do and how we present it to the world and be the ones who are taking the lead on that conversation because as we mentioned, like what you're doing, like where you want to go as an artist, when you want to go as a gallerist. So in another subject, I wanted to ask you if you have noticed any positive challenge when it came to gender equality inside the art world from when you see it, like from the art gallery's perspective.
Yeah. So when I was first, starting off my career in art history or even in, just being in galleries, there was, it makes me think of how I learned about the Guerrilla Girls and how they stood up for um, having a female presence in different museums and galleries without it just being the women as the subject of different artworks. And I feel like over the past, I guess, decade now that I've been working, um, I see so much more presence online, and I think it's a lot due to social media and people's ability to share to wider audiences that you see more female-led group shows or you see a lot more women artists being accepted into galleries and into museums. And even when I think about my own gallery, I realized we're about 50% female artists being represented. And I love being able to see artist owned, female owned galleries. There's more out there than you'd think there are, even if they don't say it across their website or, once you actually start talking to these different owners, you get to learn their stories. And, there is a big change from when we started, even just 10 years ago. So
I love that you mentioned this. Like, there is such a differences between how women are portrayed or showcased. Like, we go to a museum, we go to a gallery, we'll see us as the muse, we will see us represented on a canvas, but we will never hear the discussion about the women artists that are creating this. And at the same time, as you said, the past 10 years have been driven by a big change led by social media, the internet, feminist movements, and all of this social democratization of our speech, of what we share with others, and the opportunities that we create. Because we can be in different parts of the world right now, but we're having this conversation, and a lot of people have joined us, and that itself is a way of creating a net of support for other artists and for people who want to have these conversations, no matter what they are. And that's how you see all of these collectives, like female-led collectives in different parts of the world popping up, or even, as you mentioned, the one we don't know are female-led because it's not their definition, but still they are the ones doing the work behind the scenes. So that's really interesting. Um, I wanted to know if, what do you think are the most significant challenges that a women artist or a gallerist will face today? And at the same time, what are the biggest opportunities you think are in the way?
So I think some of the biggest challenges do have to do with having to prove yourself in this world. And in a way, that's also the biggest strength because when you prove, it's not so much about proving to others, it's about proving to yourself that you know what you're doing. And like you said, other women are our biggest cheerleaders, and we have such a wonderful connection. And I think that in itself is a strength that we draw power from the other women that are, supporting us. And so even if there are people that will try to shut you down. I mean, there are critics everywhere, and being able to overcome that and prove to yourself more than anything that you know what you're doing. And that's, the hardest thing to do is self-validate. But once you do that, you're able to really see like you are good at what you're doing the right things, and you are making waves, even if they're start off as just small little ripples.
That's right. And what do you think are the opportunities that women see today that maybe weren't here before, for example, 10 years ago?
So I think there is more of a stigma that the women should be more of like gallery help. They often have the title of gallery assistant, which is something that I started off as. But that title is so, like, it doesn't give as much detail as to what you actually do because there's so many hats that you wear. There aren't really titles that describe what artists and galleries do. Um, but the opportunity to constantly learn and do different roles and take on, pretty much the world and just constantly learn. I think that is the biggest opportunity because there are so many different aspects, whether you're learning what does it take to build a website, or how do I show my work, or maybe you want to try and make yourself better. There are residencies out there. So the ability to constantly learn and make yourself better, I think that is the biggest opportunity that women have.
That's amazing because, as you said, like through education and through all these spaces where we get the chance to develop our body of work, our careers, these are the places where we start making those little ripples, as you said. It's like where we start making these bigger waves and bigger change that we want to see. And in that same idea, what do you think would be the changes that you will love to see in the art world when it comes to gender equality?
I think that one of the biggest things that could come from gender equality would be to not have gender roles. Like there shouldn't be oh, well, they are a female or male doing this. It is a person doing this. So I think when we kind of get to that point of, looking past what gender you are, I think that's when we'll see the greatest change. But, for now, the world that we live in, it is wonderful to see, female owned or female working, um, showing more present across, internet and social media. And just being able to add more titles, I think, to the art world that really show what you do. Um, that isn't just assistant or, you know, there there's other ways that we could really make our mark shown.
There's a need for recognition, like actually naming everything that we do inside of the industry to make all of these things happen. Because at the end of the day, it's like 50% of the population, it's doing 50% of the job too. Um, and it's rather amazing what you mentioned earlier that in your own gallery you have managed to have this big representation of female artists, and it's a really varied collection of artists that you're curating. So to end this conversation, I wanted to ask you for advice, not for me, or actually maybe for me a bit, but for all emerging artists and women out there who are thinking about starting on their own gallery spaces or maybe a digital gallery. What advice would you give to them, and what would you say to them to motivate them to just go for it?
There are lots of pieces of advice that I would give, and I'm still give myself every now and then as well. But I think the main one is to have confidence in the decisions that you make, because every decision that you make does have a big impact. And if you have confidence in it, then you can follow through, or that the people around you that were waiting on that decision will also have confidence in you, and follow you. Um, I also highly advocate educating yourself in as much as you can, whether it's, self-teaching. Now that we are on social media and across websites, you know, try to look for ways to share your art, whether you're building your own website. And while that does sound like very complicated, there are so many easy and free ways to, share your art and build a website. And then the last piece of advice I have is photograph everything. I can't tell you how many artists I've worked with who will paint something or sculpt something, and then a few years later they want to reference it or show it to a client, and they don't have a good photo of it. So even if you're not super proud of that artwork, photograph it anyways and make sure you take several different angles of it, because you never know when you might need those photos later.
That's really amazing because at the same time, it's not only building a register of your body of work, but it's building a register of your journey as an artist or as a
Exactly.
gallerist. So it's
Exactly.
really important thing. So, well, we have come to the end of this interview. It's the first installment of the Women's Talk Reshaping the Art World interview series. We were here with Stephanie Coria. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us today.
Thank
I'm
you for
so glad to have you.
including me. It's
We
wonderful.
love you. We love to have you here. So thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you to all of you guys who have joined all across this interview and the ones who have stayed. We're going to be here next Tuesday with artpreneur Krista Cloutier. Same time, same channel. So see you next week. And once again, thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us today. Bye bye.